All right, looks like we are good to go. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to call this budget hearing to order. My name is Jesse Letterman. I'm the president of the Springfield City Council, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ward 1 City Councilor Maria Perez. This is our second night of budget hearings, and I did want to start by saying that in light of how long our meeting yesterday went, I have divided up what was originally supposed to be all tonight, between tonight and a meeting next week. So today we're going to hear from the school department, the mayor's office, the city council, the city clerk, the board of elections, the finance office, 311, and capital asset construction. If you're here representing a different department, then you have been moved to next week, which we did send out earlier in the day. So next week, we'll hear from employee benefits, human resources and labor relations, the law department, the office of procurement, information technology, the board of assessors, comptroller, treasurer, collector, and internal audit. So for this evening, we'll get started, and I know we're waiting for the superintendent, so we'll start with the second individual on our list, which is the mayor's office, and I understand Tom Ash is here representing the mayor's office, so we'll go to Tom, and also just before we do that, we'll welcome my colleague, Councilor Hurst, who has also joined us. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Liederman, and also to Councilors Perez and Hurst. I'm happy to be here tonight representing the mayor's office, along with TJ Plant and his staff. And I'm sure you'll have a busy night going through all these budgets. Our budget, Council President, is pretty straightforward. It is a level funded budget. In fact, it represents 8%, or I'm sorry, 1.2% less of budget than it was last year due to some changes in staffing, but still eight FTEs, and so it's level funded, and it really self-explanatory.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions for Tom relative to the mayor's budget? And I'm just admitting now as well, Councilor Whitfield has joined us. Councilor Whitfield, we just heard our first budget presentation from Mr. Ash on behalf of the mayor's office, who shared that they have a level service budget with a 1.2% decrease overall relative to some changes in salaries in the office. Any questions for Tom on the mayor's budget for his office? Seeing none. Tom, just a quick question relative to the decrease. Is that just because you have some different positions that are less senior now in there?
Exactly. We had one change. One staffer went to the law department, and her replacement came on from the police department at a slightly less salary, due to her coming on later to the position. But other than that, it's a level funded budget.
I see what you're saying. Because they're coming in at a different.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom relative to the mayor's budget for the mayor's office, that is? Seeing none. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Council President. Appreciate it.
And I'm just admitting the next individual it just says call in user 1. So could call in user 1 identify themselves?
Yeah, this is Dan.
Oh, thank you very much, Superintendent Warwick. You are actually next on the list.
Thank you very much.
I
had trouble getting in using Zoom, so I'm using my phone.
No problem at all. So we'll go now to the school department budget with Dan Warwick and his team.
Okay, and I have Mike Eaton with me. And again, sorry, I had problem with my Zoom connection. So the school department submitted a $545.4 million general fund budget that was approved by the school committee. This is an 8.2% increase over FY22. So a $41.5 million increase. All total with all our grants, it's a $710.4 million budget. We allocated $116.4 million to the schools we've allocated major portion of our ESSER money directly to the schools, and all the Student Opportunity Act money we again allocated to each school to design a plan around to effectuate that school moving forward. We have over 60 schools with different needs, so our priority was to allocate as much money to the schools and let them make strategic spending decisions with their dollars. Some key budget highlights, in addition to adding all that Opportunity Act and ESSER money out to the schools, was we have become the first universal full-day pre-K for all 3 and 4 elementary schools. Very excited about that. We're launching in the first full pre-K across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. One piece of that was middle
Superintendent, if you can hear me, I want to let you know that you are cutting out on our end a little bit. If you're on a mobile device, you may want to just change your position a little bit so we can hear you more clearly.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to speak a little as well. So some key pieces are we added a universal full-day pre-K initiative for all 3 and 4 year olds in the city, the first one in the Commonwealth to do that. And we use the Alliette building to do that, to help us do that, as well as the Early Childhood Center and the Morels building. We've also expanded City Connect services to provide wraparound services in all our schools, connecting a lot of our kids to mental health services. We've continued funding for the home visit project and added to paid internships with our IT department for SPS graduates. Transportation, there's an 8.8% increase, $3 million in transportation increase. And that's caused because of charter school expansion and the increased cost of the contract. We did put an inflation cap of 4% in the contract, which helped us tremendously because it would have gone up more than that because of the gas. But everything we can to keep transportation down. But the biggest cost driver is the expansion of charter schools. That's really
Superintendent.
that was, yep.
You're cutting out again.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. The last thing we heard clearly was that the expansion of charter schools was a big cross driver on the overall budget, but also on the transportation budget. Understood.
And that would, conclude my comments, and I'd open it up for any questions or however you want to proceed.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions for the superintendent or his team relative to the school side budget? Seeing none, I'll ask a brief question, Superintendent, relative to the ESSER funds. Are those held in a separate account, or is the budget inclusive? Like, for example, on the city side, the ARPA is sort of in its completely own category. None of it has been used in the city budget necessarily, at least in this budget document. It's all being allocated in its own process.
Yeah.
So are the ESSER funds within your budget?
Not our general fund budget.
Not in our general fund budget, right?
But they are definitely part of our all funds budget.
Right.
Within Munis, they're set up under a separate project code for as a federal pass-through grant.
Okay. And does this budget reflect? Fully funding the bonuses that were announced, retention bonuses that were announced, and can you confirm if those are for both paraprofessionals and teachers?
The retention bonuses would be for all employees, and the ESSER funds would fund that.
That was going to be my next question, was outside of paraprofessionals and teachers. So also any other employees employed by the school staff. Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much. The other question I had was relative to where we are with the Student Opportunity Act. So has the state finally fully funded that? Are we seeing a full allocation to Springfield from that?
We're getting 1/7 over the course of 7 years. So we're in year 2. So we're at 2/7 now. So it'll continue to increase for the next 5 years to where we'll get the full share. But we're getting our fair proportion each year. So it's over 7 years, it'll go to the full funding.
So that's the case across the whole Commonwealth for every district?
That's the case across the whole Commonwealth.
Okay. Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to know how much the all staff retention bonus was.
I wouldn't have an exact figure on that right now. We'd have to calculate that. So
Did it go by performance, or did everyone get an equal amount?
So it would be it would be for retention over 3 years. So it would be for folks who stay in the system each year, and they get a third of it over the next 3 years. So the first third would be June 30th, the second third would be the following June 30th, and the last third would be June 30th. So it would be for staying for 3 years, and it would include an attendance piece. So they'd get it based on a pro rata share of their attendance during those years.
Okay, is there anything for some of the employees that worked during COVID and kind of like put their lives at risk and their families' lives at risk? But
yeah, that was the ESSER piece we were figuring for that. Yeah.
Well, what if they no longer work for the school department though, but they did during the time of COVID?
If they worked this year, they'd get it, but they wouldn't get it. We never got the ARPA money like the city did, so we didn't have any money to hand out, and we couldn't use ESSER money for that kind of situation. That could only be done with ARPA money, and we didn't get any ARPA money. So we're trying bonuses because we never got the ARPA money.
Mike, do you know the number for the retention bonus or a rough estimate?
Without having the final attendance figures, Tracy, it would be around probably around 20 million over the course of the 3 years if it was around full attendance. But as the superintendent said, attendance will factor into the proration of what each employee receives. So, but 20 million ballpark, I think, over the course of 3 years.
And when you say attendance, so if they go over their normal like sick time allotment, like what does that mean?
Well, it's still being negotiated, but the retention bonus is going to have a maximum that you can earn. And then it will be based on attendance in terms of your days spent in work or at work. And we're in the process of kind of negotiating with separate groups to get their feedback and their input and develop a final methodology in terms of what we'll use for everybody.
Okay, because as you all know that, we got a lot of folks that worked during COVID that were going to do home checks and things like that. And we're working, still putting their lives at risk that may not work for the school department anymore. And I know that like not ARPA, but ESSER funds, like kind of you were able to transfer some of your spending to ESSER funds. So didn't that free up some of the general fund money?
No, we couldn't. We couldn't use ESSER funds for that purpose. ESSER funds can only be used for retention.
Is that ESSER funds can only be used for retention?
Yeah, we couldn't use them for what you were talking about.
No, what I'm talking about is if you transfer some of the expenses of the school department and use ESSER funds for that instead, it will free up some general fund money that you would probably normally use for other expenses. I'm not talking about retention bonuses here or bonuses at all. I'm saying, were there any expenses that you could transfer general fund money to and use ESSER funds instead?
We didn't supplant any funds with ESSER. Right. ESSER's funding all new initiatives, including the retention bonus. So there wasn't any offsetting, if you will, to ESSER from the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield.
One more thing. I just want you all to consider, I'm sorry. I just want you all to consider. And the folks that did put their lives on the line and at risk, just like you did, and try to figure out what we can do for them, because they feel like you all don't care about them and the jobs that they did during that time. And so if there's any way that you could go back and look to maybe offer something, it's not always the amount, but it's just that they were considered for something, that would be great, because right now they just feel like they did this service, and now they're just like, there's no appreciation for the work that they did during that time. So I'm just going to ask that you try to look for another way to give them something, even if it's $500, give them something. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Are there any further questions for the school department? Seeing none, thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Mike. We'll move now to the Office of the City Council, and that will be presented by the City Clerk, Gladys Hoyle.
Good evening, good afternoon, councilors. As Councilor Letterman stated, I am presenting for the City Council first out of the 3 departments. And that is a pretty basic budget, as you all can see from the materials provided from Finance. The only changes that I requested was an increase in the salaries for the 2 senior council aides. Aside from that, it is pretty much level funded as it was last fiscal year.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any questions for the clerk? And the first question is from Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gladys, did you ask for any funds for a lawyer for the City Council? Because I know we've been asking for a year over year. And so did you put in the request and it was cut out, or was it not asked for?
When I met with attorney, well, actually with Judge Payne, prior to his, it was past the budget season. So I did speak to him, and that was a conversation that was had, including myself and Judge Payne. And then prior to that with then Council President Marcus Williams, that it was a need. It was something that the rest of the council was asking for. So my concerns and the concerns of the councils were relayed, but it was past the deadline for submitting the budget for the council.
And how much of an increase did you ask for the 2 senior staff? And did you put in any type of increase for the new staff?
As a matter of fact, the salary for the new staff person was negotiated at a higher rate. Typically, his starting rate, or the starting rate for that position, would have been $42,000, and we negotiated it so that it would be on the higher end at $47,500, understanding the fact that he would be sitting in on late meetings and doing the subcommittee meetings as well in the evenings. And the staff, the increase for the staff was put in at, I believe, a little over 4,000 each for the council staff. I can give you the exact number in a moment.
Councilor Whitfield, if you can hear me. Councilor Whitfield, if you can hear me.
Councilor Whitfield, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Councilor Whitfield, if you can hear me, we cannot hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you. We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. Can you put the amount in the chat, Councilor Letterman, for me, that she said that the staff is getting?
I'll type it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, the clerk will put it. Does that
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Councilor Perez, followed by Councilor Hurst.
Question is, since the requirement requiring a lawyer and because of the budget, it has passed, what's next? Because I think this is very needed for us, for the council, and I one of the advocator for it. So what's the next step just to get educated on the matter? Thank you.
I'm not sure if Lindsay, I think, is on from finance.
Sure. So yeah, Lindsay or TJ, I think you're together. If you could give some clarity relative to Councilor Perez's question, if there is not a position or funding allocated for outside legal counsel for the city council in the current budget document, what recourse is there for the city council?
So the best recourse for the city council, if it's not in the budget document as in the city council budget, is to work out to have the person paid out of the law department and dedicated or hired for the city council, and just be a law department employee.
Councilor Perez, did that answer your question?
I will say at this moment, yes. Thank you.
TJ, the attorney that's on retainer for the police superintendent, are they on retainer out of the law department line item?
No, they actually are on retainer out of the police department's budget. And I think that was only because of funding issues that were happening in the law department for the OTPS side of the house. So I think they just put them on retainer because a lot of the police department had money in their budget in fiscal 2001 and just kept them there. So I personally like to see all the expenses go through the law department as a way to keep track of it all as we're putting attorneys on retainer. But the issue that I have with all of it is that I know the conversation's been had is that I think there's a fundamental kind of disagreement of what that a council for the city council would look like in terms of how that shapes up against the law department. And my thought from the years ago when this was asked originally was, and I have not talked to Judge Payne about it, but according to Eddie, is that you can't have a law department employee contradicting the city's solicitor and the city's attorney. And I haven't had any of that clarified at all yet. I haven't had that conversation with Judge Payne. I just remember that or recall that from the conversation we had back in probably 2, 3, 4 years ago when that first came up when the council was seeking their return.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly have some thoughts on it, but I'm going to go to Councilor Hurst, followed by Councilor Whitfield, and then if their questions don't address mine, then I'll ask those at that time. Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, no, TJ, I appreciate you being honest. I mean, that's the first time that I've actually heard that. I figured all along that was probably why we haven't been able to retain our own attorney. I disagree with that philosophy. It seems to me that we ought to be able to do the same thing, especially if the law department is not able to provide us what we need. And so we certainly shouldn't be absent an attorney. But the fact that you were as honest as you were, I'd love clarification from the mayor as well as from Judge Payne, just to help substantiate what it is that you said and reiterate what it is that you said. But I appreciate that. Certainly disagree with it, but appreciate it. Gladys, the staff, they received an increase. Do they typically receive increases on a yearly basis? When is the last time that they received an increase just in their salary? Do they receive yearly increases as well? Is this, how did this come about? What was the impetus?
That was something that I put in because at the start of my tenure as city clerk, the first thing I did was kind of look at everybody's salaries, including elections, council, and the clerk staff, and started a pay study across all 3 departments as well as 311. And part of what I saw in their salaries was that they hadn't gotten salaries in a few years. I only looked 3 years back, and aside from their cost of living increases, and that also they're not paid on par with other cities and towns our size for the amount of work that they do, the evening meetings and what have you. And then they do the bulk of those afternoon and evening meetings and are a direct connection for this department in order to help all 13 counselors. So that was the impetus for me submitting the budget request for those two staff, and for also asking for a higher starting rate for the new administrative council aide, because we weren't getting the candidates. As you know, that position was left open 4 months after LeVar Click transferred over to the mayor's office, because we just couldn't get anyone.
So I'd love to see that pay study. If you could submit that pay study in terms of what other municipalities of our size are receiving who do similar duties, that would be greatly appreciated. So they received a cost of living increase in addition to the $4,000 that you recommended, or that they might receive it, and then they also received some money related to COVID. So that's a lot for this year. I mean, they must have received, I mean, we're talking about 4,000 plus 3,000, 3,500 maybe is, if I remember off the top of my head, that's 7,500 plus their cost of living raise increase. I mean, that's a significant jump. And I guess, my hope is that, it seems like we would look at it comprehensively throughout the entire city hall and administrative assistants throughout. I don't know if we've done that, but I'd love to see the numbers, and I also would love to see if their duties and responsibilities increase. They've been doing they've been covering the city council meetings, as long as I can remember, in the evenings, and during COVID, we didn't have many evening meetings where we didn't have too many. Certainly had a lapse. And so I guess I wonder what additional responsibilities might have been added that caused you to arrive at that conclusion. So we can certainly talk about it offline, but I'd love to see that. I'd love to see the pay study that you put forth.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And I want to see can you send the whole pay study to the council? Because I'm going to have to agree, like, if we're going to do increases, we should look at all staff across the city and do a complete pay study to make sure that things are fair and equitable. Because when I think about equity, a lot of times the lower paid staff are people of color. And so I want to make sure that they're getting paid fairly as well. I mean, I know when I worked there, I was under some of the staff that came in that were not people of color. They were white people. And even when the hiring happens, sometimes people of color are paid less. And so I would like to see that all people are paid equitably across the board and not because of any other reason but that. And so a pay study for the whole city, TJ, might be warranted to make sure everybody is getting fair opportunities and fair pay, because I got a few calls about other staff in other departments that feel like even through promotions, they were underpaid when they were hired based on other folks that were hired with probably the same qualifications. So we're going to be fair, let's be fair. We're going to be equitable, let's be equitable, and let's do a pay study. I especially want to see that in the Office of Planning and Eco Dev. I want to see that in DPW. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can for everybody and not certain groups of people. Also, I wanted to ask about the law department. So did you say there will be a lawyer in the law department for the council? TJ?
It's my understanding that Judge Payne hired an attorney to assign to the city council. I haven't had a conversation with him in recent weeks about it, but he was looking to get restaffed and fill up all the vacancies and have a dedicated lawyer on staff that's going to work on council issues.
So that lawyer wouldn't be solely dedicated to the council though. They would do other responsibilities.
I couldn't comment on that piece of it. Well, I'm not sure it would be like a Tom Moore situation, what was Tom Moore, where he did a lot of work for the council, but he also did a couple other things with the SRA and authority, or I'm not sure there's 37.5 hours worth of work a week on just council issues, and that's something I'll let him figure out, along with the council and the mayor. I mean, I can't comment on that because I'm not sure what requests are coming to the law department from all 13 councilors, but I'm happy to have the conversation again and further.
Well, okay. When it's law budget, I'll ask Judge Payne. But one thing I do want to say is when the mayor needs extra support from lawyers, you guys go out and get it. When the police department needs extra support from lawyers, you guys go out and get it. Ever since I've been on the council, ever since I started, and probably before, the city council has been asking for funding for a lawyer. So again, I appreciate your honesty and your truth, but we also work for the residents of the city of Springfield. And because we disagree with the mayor does not negate our need for a lawyer. This is what we're supposed to do. We have a financial responsibility to do the right thing, and we have other responsibilities to do the right thing. And because they don't mesh with what the mayor says, does not mean we don't deserve a lawyer of our own. This is our job. We're also not paid at the salaries of other other towns in the Commonwealth. But we still have a job to do, and we still do it, even if our responsibilities increase. So I'm a little concerned. I'm not saying that our staff doesn't do an awesome job. I'm not saying that. I'm not even saying that they don't deserve it. But what I am saying is other staff deserves it as well. And so we got to look at equity. We got to look at fairness. And I don't think it's fair that when the mayor needs an additional lawyer, it's paid through a retainer or wherever money you have in the law department budget, but we don't get that same respect. And we too are voted in by the residents of the city of Springfield, and we too are paid from the residents of the city of Springfield. We too have a job to do for the residents of the city of Springfield. So I'm going to have to disagree with the logic that was given about us not being able to get our lawyer because we disagree with the mayor. Sometimes that's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do. And so we need to have further conversations about that.
I think the debate's healthy. I just think we need to figure out a way so we have good government where we hash out some of the issues we have. And there are going to be fundamental disagreements. The mayor did have to hire an attorney because the law department had to recuse itself, couldn't represent the mayor and the city council. And that was, by virtue of the facts of the case.
And we needed a lawyer for the same reason, but we didn't have it in the budget. We needed a lawyer for the same reason. We didn't have it in the budget. So does it make the mayor's? That's just not fair, TJ. Look how that sounds. We needed it for the same exact reason, but we didn't have it in the budget, but the mayor does.
You can have this conversation with Judge Payne, the city solicitor, and to get a sense of what his thinking is. I'm not going to put words in his mouth of where he's at. I just know what conversations I've been around historically based upon the recent lawsuit. So.
All right, and I don't mind having a conversation with Judge Payne or anybody else. So when it's time for the law department, we will get into the weeds of it all over again. Thank you, Mr. President.
I don't mind debating it either, but we're not going to get anywhere tonight.
Thank you, Councilor.
And we will love to work together. Sometimes, TJ, it's not just us. There's two sides. There's two sides that got to be willing. So I would love it if we could do more in collaboration and more working together. But sometimes, and you know this because even through the property tax, I got no response. I didn't even get an inkling of wanting to work together on that. No communication. It was nothing. No collaboration, nothing. So it's not a one-sided thing where the city council doesn't want to work with the mayor's office. So when we talk about these things, it has to be well-rounded and the truth has to be told.
Thank you, Councilor
Thank you.
Whitfield. Councilor Whitfield, did that conclude?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Are there any further questions for the clerk relative to the office of the city council? Seeing none, I just wanted to comment briefly relative to the conversation on the need for legal counsel for the city council. I want to say I think we should have the conversation with the law department during that hearing. I did raise that conversation in my first meeting with Judge Payne before I was city council president. And I know that the former city council president raised it as well. TJ, from a sort of organizational viewpoint, I think there's really two issues at hand. One is an issue that's impacting the law department overall, which is, just the fact that there's been a shortage of lawyers in the law department, and that has been challenging relative to even just the day-to-day operation of the city council in terms of just having, a basic legal advice on special permitting, on making sure that the reasons that we have drafted for issuing special permits are appropriately done, or having assistance in drafting legislation to make sure that it falls in line adequately with the city charter and that the language is correct. We're lucky that we have a few counselors who have legal backgrounds and are able to do that, but that is not a prerequisite for being a city councilor, right? So we also have counselors like myself who do not have that legal background, and who want to make sure that our ideas are turned into laws and that don't conflict with other aspects of our already established city code. So that's one side of it. I think the other side of it, and the reason why there's been a request in the past and a desire for some sort of retainer on an outside independent legal opinion is, the fact that sometimes the mayor and the city council do not agree. And that is a healthy part of our democracy. And in some other communities, we have found that, the city councils do have their own independent attorney who can assist them both with legal opinions, or if you do have to go through the court system. And I think that unfortunately, the idea of the legislative and executive branches of government suing each other is sometimes viewed as some sort of breakdown in government, but I really don't view it that way. I think that it is, very much a part of government. The judiciary is a branch of government, and their job is to put to rest those types of disagreements. And certainly we've had a significant one decided recently, and was only really possible because we were very fortunate that some volunteers, very talented attorneys, stepped forward and made that possible for the city council. But there's other cases where we've had to secure voluntary outside legal counsel as well, relative to the biomass waste incinerator and the efforts that the city council has undertaken to enforce the law as we see it in that case. So, I think that I think there is a pathway to do it, and I think that it is something that the administration, I hope, will actually view as something positive for Springfield, because in the end, if we can be able to more easily put some of those disagreements aside relative to utilizing the legal system, we can move forward more quickly. And so that would be my hope. So that we will definitely bring that up again with the solicitor during his budget time. And, want my colleagues to know that since stepping into the role, it is something that I also am concerned about, and will certainly advocate on our behalf for. Madam Clerk, did you have anything else on the office of the city council, or should we move to the clerk's office?
I just wanted to do a kind of quickly respond to Councilor Whitfield's concerns about a pay study citywide. That part of what I wanted to do when I became city clerk was to make sure there was equity among all the departments that I managed. And part of that was the pay study that I had my staff work on, because I know, coming from elections, that staff in that department, and we'll talk about that a little later, is the lowest paid front-facing staff in this building. And I do try to advocate as much as I can for all of the departments equally. But when I see that there is a lack of equity as a woman of color myself, if you look at all the departments that I do supervise, there is very diverse staff, age, their backgrounds, economic backgrounds in the city, language skills. I think all of the departments that I do manage have bilingual staff kind of thread throughout all of the departments because it's important in serving the residents of Springfield. And part of that is trying to get equitable pay for all of them. Right now, we're concentrating on the council staff. Unfortunately, I don't have power over all of the city, but I think having this type of model, I sat and met with Auditor No for all of for this clerk's department. And as part of that is trying to set kind of a baseline for how all of these departments should be run, and then bringing them all up to where we see other cities and towns are being paid, are being, the work that they're expected to do. And things have changed since COVID. We have been expected to do more. The staff has been expected to do more across all the departments, including 311, which Roy Goodwin will talk to later. And we're having, really honestly, we're having issues keeping staff because they're going to the private sector, because they're finding it more lucrative to work outside of city government. So I will continue to fight for all of the staff, including elections, including council, including 311, including clerks, so that we can retain the knowledge, the staff that we have, and hopefully set up the new group of city employees that will have some place to go to. Because right now they're scrambling away from city government versus trying to ascend, because that's how I got here. And I remember working with you, Councilor Whitfield, when you were a budget analyst in elections, and you know the kind of work ethic we had down there. So I'm sure you're familiar with that. And that's the type of atmosphere that I'm looking to have here in council, clerks, and elections as well.
Gladys, thank you. I'm just, Councilor President, because she said my name, I just wanted to respond. Commissioner, I appreciate you doing what you're supposed to do as a department head. I'm just asking that others do the same and make sure there's equity across the board in all departments, including finance, including DPW, including any other department. So that wasn't anything to say that you wasn't doing what you're supposed to do. I'm asking that it's done across the board for all departments. And if some of the staff are not up to the level that they should be at based on whatever study is done, I'm hoping that the department heads for those departments will do the same, because I see in some departments where there's promotions and there's things that's happening that doesn't seem fair and equitable. It just doesn't. And folks are paid less or folks are paid more. And I don't know what it's based on, all the way, but it just doesn't seem fair. And it doesn't seem fair to the people that it's happening to, or the individuals that it's happening to. So thank you for doing what you're supposed to do as a department head. I want the entire city to do what they're supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Madam Clerk, do you want to move to the office of the city clerk?
Sure. The office of the city clerk is currently staffed with 12 full-time employees, including myself and the assistant clerk. We do have a level service budget for that department. There is going to be a small change in departments in that public records will be going to the law department. So it's included in our current worksheet, but that will be moving and transferring from the clerk's budget into the law department budget, as public records is going to be handled out of that department. And the only other change that I can see is, that I think is noteworthy, is to OTPS, which is the addition of $13,000 for software that we use here. Typically that was handled under the Comcast grant, which we no longer receive. That was part of the money that we had to add to this budget in order to cover that expense.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions for Gladys on the budget for the office of the city clerk? Seeing none. Gladys, can you explain to me a little bit more about the public records reorganization?
So the public records at one point through the Mass General laws was transferred under the purview of the city clerk's office. So that was statewide. All city and town clerks then became the lead records access officer, but there can be a designee. Due to the amount of public records and FOIA requests that we have, it was under the law department. It did go under Anthony in the city clerk's office. Then Tashina Davis became the records access officer, and then myself, just the amount of daily requests to get. I had two staff. So I had the public records coordinator and a public records analyst that were handling it with some assistance from the law department. And part of Judge Payne kind of reviewing department protocols said that it should go into the law department. That way it could be handled solely through the law department, which I completely agree with.
So they're just handling the requests. You're still the keeper of record.
Correct. So I'm keeper of all city records, vital records and other, but the requests that come through this portal will be handled through the law department, paralegals, and the attorneys there.
Okay. I might have some more questions about that, but not right now. Any other questions for the clerk on the office budget? Seeing none, we'll move then to your next division, the Board of Elections.
So the Board of Elections is currently staffed with 5 full-time employees. That includes 3 election assistants, 1 election specialist, and a deputy election commissioner. The budget is pretty much the same. It's a level service budget. The only change that I foresee, and this is going to have to be a future conversation, is we're going to have additional funding for the special primary and special election that we have to schedule. That was not included in this budget as it was not foreseen as an expense. But aside from that, the changes are minimal.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. TJ, we did become aware today, thank you to our state legislative delegation, that we will be able to hold a special election relative to the vacancy in the Ward 5 seat, the special act that was sent to the legislature by the council last year, was signed into law just 11 days ago. And so certainly there will be necessary expense associated with that. What will be the plan through your office relative to ensuring that sufficient funds are made available?
We will bring an appropriation order to the council to move money into the elections budget to hold the election.
Thank you. When you do that, I'd like to make sure that you take into account the municipal election notification ordinance and the costs associated with that. Not only is it the law, but I think this is really exactly the type of situation that we envisioned when putting that in place. I think it'll be especially important for residents in Ward 5 to know that there is going to be such an off-cycle election. So I hope that that will be fully funded in that appropriation order.
Yes, as soon as the clerk brings forward the estimates, we will bring to the city council for appropriation.
Thank you. I saw Council Hurst.
I did have a question, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
And this is to Gladys and a little off subject, but related to the special election. How did we miss knowing that the legislation was signed? What is normal protocols? Do they notify you? And what occurred that we didn't know, I guess, so that we couldn't budget it into this budget?
Typically, whatever counselor is shepherding that legislation through the state, with the state, in conjunction with the state delegation, would have kind of been keeping an eye on it and having the staff person for Rep. Pupolo also keep an eye on it so that they can notify us once it was on each step. That way, if there was some kind of testimony that needed to happen on behalf of the council could submit that to the Western Mass delegation. But to be honest with you, I don't know how it was missed.
Yeah, I guess this is new to us all. So to the extent that we could just identify what might have gone wrong, it just seems like if folks wanted to testify, we ought to have been able to testify. And, we probably ought to have known where it was at the various stages in the House. So the fact that was missed, we definitely don't want that to happen in the future. So thank you. And, I hope it works out. And if there's anything that we need to do to help fund the special election, we'd love to do it.
And to that point, Councilor Letterman had mentioned the ordinance that required notification. That was something that was included in this budget. So we have $35,000. So that includes the postage and mailing and postcards as well. So that is in this budget.
And you think you budgeted enough for
Well, that's
the
just for the
additional special election?
notification.
Okay,
That's just for that. So that does not include poll workers, polling locations, delivery, all of the other costs associated with the actual election itself. And that's a figure that I'm working on so that we can get it to finance.
but I guess to your point, it also seems like that notification might be different for the special election, no?
We'd have
In
to.
terms of
notify.
making folks aware.
Exactly. So that would be different. This is in addition to. Not as
Okay,
a
and you're saying in terms of notification, we budgeted enough money for both the special and for the primary and the general election
No,
this year.
this is solely just to cover the cost of the ordinance. So not at all for the special.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
And the
Okay, thank you.
notification would only go out to the Ward 5 voters, and so it'd be very
Absolutely.
limited.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. I have a question relative to the funding that is allegedly already included in the budget of the Board of Elections for the municipal election notification ordinance. So what municipal election were you initially budgeting for? Because there wouldn't be, but it wasn't intended to be a municipal election in FY23, right?
No, there wasn't one for FY23. But we
So,
included the postcard mailing for this one in this budget.
so what was the intention for those particular funds before we knew there would be a special election?
To do it prior to the state election.
Oh, so
It's
okay.
only for municipal, but in order to have the continuity.
Oh, okay. I think that's great. Yeah,
Yes.
to be clear, I mean, the ordinance itself only calls for notification of municipal elections, and our intent around that was, or our feeling at the time was, that certainly we had limited funds. And so we weren't seeing the same level of non-participation at that time in state elections. So I think our feeling was, if the state had wanted to enact something for the state elections, they may pay for it. But certainly, if there are funds to do it for the state, I think going above and beyond the ordinance is more than fair. But yes, certainly for Ward 5 in this instance, it'll be critical to make sure that everything is done. So that's great. Any other questions relative to the office Board of Elections? Seeing none. We will, I think that, Madam Clerk, do you want to take 311 now, since that's also under you?
I think Roy is on, and so.
So we'll go to Roy.
Sure.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Roy.
Okay, yeah, so the 311 budget is pretty straightforward. The level service budget funding. We have a slight increase in the salaries for fiscal year 23 to cover cost of living wages for myself and for the staff as well. And also just a small increase in our department for the copier and printer, because we do a lot more printing and stuff now, sending out mailing and stuff. So just a little slight increase in that. Everything else is pretty straightforward in the budget.
Thank you, Roy. Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gladys, Roy was one of the individuals that I thought was grossly underpaid when he was promoted to the director of 311. Was a study done for his position?
Yes, there was a study done for his position as well. And I agree. I do believe that out of, the statewide 311 costs and operators, it's hard to gauge in terms of the volume to do a direct match with his salary. But I do agree with you. And it was one of kind of the projects that I had starting was I first met with Roy and we went over his salary, and that was part of the pay study as well.
Okay, because I was just comparing it to the individual in the role before him, and the cut was a little drastic from what she was paid to what he was offered in the position. And so when I talk about equity, those are some of the things, sometimes there's going to be a slight cut, but that was a huge cut. And so did we ever do anything to correct his salary gap? Did we ask to add more to the budget for that?
I believe we did.
He's a
I know-
director.
Yes, I know that I did speak to finance about adding to Roy's direct salary as a department head. And then Roy can maybe speak to, you know, the request that was put in and what was agreed upon.
So I can,
Yeah, so
go ahead, Roy.
Let's
I did it.
let's take a step back for a second. Roy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can.
I
speak
mean,
on
we
that.
don't have to talk numbers. If you don't, you know, it's all public knowledge. We don't have to talk numbers specifically. I just want to know what the process was like.
Yeah, so I kind of did a review of the statewide salary for other 301 departments in the state, and then also other department heads in the city of Springfield. And I saw where my salary was compared to others. So I did bring it to Gladys, gave her my figures, what I thought would be something fair, and put it in the budget, and then it came back with a smaller increase than what I was hoping for. So that's where we are currently. I believe instead of 5% increase on my current salary, which would be.
Can we talk about the justification of that, TJ?
So to talk about the process that happened.
TJ, just can I say for 1 second, Councilman Field, I don't mean to interrupt you. I've just got somebody in the waiting room that I want to admit if they need to be here, but they are simply named Frank. Are we expecting a Frank?
I'm not expecting a Frank. But
I'm gonna admit them and ask them who they are. I just want to, I don't want to not admit them, but I'd like to make sure that they are supposed to be a part of this meeting and that we don't have any issue. Is that all right with everybody? So just bear with me for one moment. All right, so we have, I see here. We have a Frank joining. He's connecting to audio. Frank, if you can hear me, can you identify yourself? Okay, Frank, Frank's connected to audio. Frank, if you can hear me, can you please identify yourself? Frank, can you please identify yourself? I can see that you're unmuted, Frank. Can you identify yourself? Okay. I'm going to remove Frank.
President Letterman, I think it may be best, just in case Frank is supposed to be here and is listening in. If it's okay with you, I think we can leave him here, but I'll be ready with the kick out button if we deem it necessary at any point.
Okay.
But like you said, I just don't want someone who is supposed to be here to not be able to attend.
I agree. We are also broadcasting live on YouTube as well.
Correct.
We've been very lucky thus far for 2.5 years. So just trying to make sure we stay that way. I apologize for having to interrupt the flow of debate, Councilor Whitfield. So we were with TJ. TJ, you were discussing the justification relative to the request made by Mr. Goodman.
yeah, so actually, want to go back to the process by which the Personnel Review Committee. So Roy was hired, and the policy is to put him at the base of the new position. I don't have the number with me, and I don't necessarily want to talk numbers unless Roy wants to talk numbers. So he was moved up with a pay raise going from the call center rep up to the department head of 311. And so that moved him, whatever he made then, to I don't even know the number off the top of my head, I can get that. So then the request was made in this budget for an additional increase. And the decision was made that it would be 3% on top of the 2% as a way to get moving towards a higher salary. And it wasn't jumping, and I don't even remember the request off the top of my head either. I'll have to look that up based upon what Gladys submitted. So that was the decision. The issue that you raised just about salary comparing it to the prior person, that really the tough one to compare to, only because that person was here for 10 years, got raises and grew through the 10 years and got up to I don't even know, upper 70s, lower 80s. I don't even recall because she's been gone for a few years. But so that is the issue that we grappled with when we hired Roy, and the policies and procedures we have in place for the Personnel Review Committee, otherwise known as the PRC. And that is a decision that was made based upon the budget that we released here for the FY22.
Well, so TJ, I know that over the years, positions actually increase. So I have seen when there's been employees that's been with a department for years, and then someone else comes in and make more than them in the same role. So I still, it's not apples to apples. It's not like that all the time. I understand.
I get it. It's not a perfect system.
I understand, but no, it's not a perfect system, but it's based on 3 white males making the decision of who's going to get what type of money. And this is an issue that I brought up to you. And I sat in the mayor's office, and it was regarding if that employee was paid at the bottom of the base. But I don't know, and I don't want to put that employee on the spot because I think that employee also does a good job. But the thing that bothers me is I don't think it's an equitable process, because for the simple fact that you have 3 white males making the decision. There's no women, there's no people of color. So that alone is not an equitable situation. And offline, I want to talk to Roy. I want to talk to the finance department and see that we can get him to where he deserves. Does Roy do a good job? I'm sure he does. I've known Roy for a really long time, and he's a respectable, honorable person, and he deserves to be paid what he deserves, just like everybody else, just like the staff for the city council. And I'm pretty sure the staff for the city council is going to be close to the pay of Roy, who's a department head, and their staff, their admin. There's no way they should be close to a salary of a department head. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And we need to do something to encourage that it's a fair process, and the folks that's making the decision is equitable, and the decision makers are being made by people of multiple races and multiple sexualities or gender, whatever you want to call it, because that's when you get fair decision making. But 3 white males in the room, you're not going to get it. That's the reason that the country is in the state that it's in right now. And so we need to look at that. We need to look at that. And when I brought it to the mayor and I sat in the room with you, you all laughed at it like it was a joke. It's not a joke.
I don't even know what you're talking about laughing. You're making so many broad.
It's not, TJ, you were there.
Council,
you were there. You were there.
Just keep it there. Making broad comments about this stuff. I'm happy to talk to you.
Well, because I can't get into, I don't want to get into the details of the weeds on this call.
We talk
so I'll be fair.
You can call me offline all the time.
Okay, so I will,
Councilor Whitfield and Director Plant, I have no intention of interrupting the flow of debate. I would just ask that each of you speak at once. I'm going to hand the floor back to Councilor Whitfield. I will give Director Plant a chance to reply afterwards, and we'll continue to move forward. Councilor Whitfield, the floor is yours.
is the floor mine or Councilor Hurst?
No, the floor is yours, Councilor Whitfield. Like I said, I had no intention of interrupting the flow of debate, but if everybody talks at once, nobody can hear it. So I'll hand it back to you, Councilor Whitfield, to finish.
I think I said, Councilor, what I wanted to say, but I'm not going to be silenced. I'm talking in broad terms so I don't bring other folks into the mix, but I'm pretty sure that you understand what I'm saying. And if you don't, here's my point. The decision-making should not solely be made by 3 white males when it comes to salary and increases and promotions and things like that. Because that's who the PRC committee is. I brought that to your attention. I brought it to the mayor's attention. And in that meeting, there was laughing going on like it's a joke. And it's not, because you're playing with people's livelihoods and they need the fair opportunities that you get and that everybody else gets. And I'm going to leave that comment there. And I'm not looking for a response. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. I will move now to Councilor Hurst, followed by Councilor Perez.
Yeah, I think Councilor Whitfield did a great job in terms of highlighting, some of the issues that exist right now. I mean, and in fact, I didn't think she was painting anything with a broad brush. I actually thought she was fairly specific. And the fact that you all haven't changed your practice is purposeful. And it's also problematic. And, I don't even know if I expect more at this point in time, because I was in that meeting. And, when we brought it to your attention and the voting members were 3 white men, like she said, you still haven't done anything about it right now. And so when we start talking about department heads of color that haven't received their just due, we are conscientious of the fact that those that are making the decisions to pay them or to increase their salary don't look like them. And when I look at Gladys and I look at the amount of responsibility that she has now, and I look at what she's paid, it's appalling. It's appalling. It's appalling. And they may not say anything to you all, and that because they can't, but we can. And so it seems to me that something has to change. And if you've done a study and you can pay our administrative assistants, and I don't want to get too in the weeds about how I feel, but if you can pay our administrative assistants exactly what the pay study says, then you want to be able to pay Roy exactly what the pay study says and exactly what it is that he's done the research on. He does, his work is impeccable. I call there all the time, almost to a fault. And they're always able to help me. They're always able to assist. And that's because of Roy. Gladys, I don't know how you do what you do. But the fact that folks have settled for what it is that you all are settling for is problematic. And you can't speak, but we can. And now is the time. I don't know if you put in an increase for yourself, Gladys. I might not have heard that, but the idea that you're manning more departments or womaning more departments than the previous individual in your position and still being paid less is despicable. And at some point in time, folks have to fight for themselves, but I understand, that's not always easy. And so right now, while we have the opportunity, we're going to stand up for you. And, something has to change. Something has to change. But we certainly appreciate your work. And, Roy, my hand was raised to really just give you kudos and all that you're doing. Keep up the great work. And, I hope the administration comes around. And if they can give our administrative assistants what the pay scale says, and I'm sure they're making more than you, then they ought to be able to give you what it is that you rightfully deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. Councilor Perez.
Well, I have to say that I totally agree. One of the concerns that I have is the 311. I need to know how many are on staff. I think that I have a lot of concern when it comes to 311 and the responsibilities that they have been taken when it comes to decision making. I think that's another department that we should look and do a very thorough case study. I am very concerned because I asked about the procedure receiving the information from the community and how it's filtered out. And I think, and I want my colleagues to look closely at that case study. And I am 100%, I agree. Gladys has obtained a lot of responsibility. And I'm appalled that right now she has not been getting a raise with the raise of the job and the amount of job that she's doing right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Is there any further questions relative to the 311 budget?
I'm sorry, President.
Councilor Perez.
I need that. I will request to see the case study for 311 because I really have concern, and I'm just saying that I want to see it. I am very concerned, and my other colleagues should be also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. TJ, can you make sure that the entire council is forwarded the budget study? Is this a budget study specifically relative to the?
I have never seen the budget study. I'd have to get it from Gladys, who just put the request into the budget and referenced the study.
So Gladys, there is a salary study on the 311 director position, or for all the positions in 311?
Just for there's a specific one for the 311 director position, but I'd like to clarify with Councilor Perez if she's looking at more of a metric on the call volume and the output, or if she's looking at the pay study, because I think she's referencing something else, but I could be mistaken.
I'm looking at both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilor Hurst?
Just quickly, Mr. President. Gladys, can you tell us what pay studies you've done? Just reiterate for me.
So separate. Roy did his own pay study for just the director position at my request.
Okay.
That was part of my first meeting with him. He has a separate pay study. Go ahead.
Got it. Hold on, just really quickly. TJ, you said you haven't seen that pay study?
Have not.
So you haven't seen the pay study. And so that if you haven't seen the pay study, how could you arbitrarily give him the increase that you gave him?
The mayor made the decision. The mayor made the decision.
Sorry?
The mayor made the decision that he was going to do a max 3% above COLA.
So Gladys, what I'm hearing, Gladys and Mr. President, is that Gladys asked a department head to do a pay study. He submits the pay study to you, Gladys. Gladys, you in turn turn that pay study into who? Did you turn it into TJ or the mayor's office? Who did you turn it into?
And I think just to clarify how the budget is developed in terms of 311 versus the other three that I presented, 311 is submitted by Roy himself. So he submitted his own budget for 311. I did not submit that as the cabinet head for that department, but I did review the pay study with Roy, and he and I spoke on an agreed upon amount that he should request that was equitable for a position as a department head for a 311 dispatch or a 311 call center in a city this size, based on the pay study.
And so the mayor chose to fund it at a lesser amount. Is that accurate, Gladys?
Yes, and the exact amount is, again, it's Roy has the budget.
I don't need the exact amount. Sorry to cut you off, Gladys. I don't need the exact amount, but I guess my problem, Roy, is that Roy, who'd you submit it to?
I submitted well, I submitted the pay study to Gladys directly. And then I turned over my budget over to my budget analyst.
And so in your budget,
See this?
I'm sorry,
ahead.
Roy. So in
Yeah,
your
so then
budget, did it include the pay increase that you and Gladys agreed upon?
Yes, it did.
And it wasn't fun. But so TJ, you haven't seen it. I guess my question is, how in the world were folks actually considering an increase if they hadn't even seen what it was that you increased? I mean, you haven't even seen the pay study. How would you know what the increase is if you haven't received the pay study? Or was the mayor just like, no, I don't care what they request, I'm gonna fund it at the levels that I want to fund it? Is that what it was, TJ?
Conversation, so the request was for $14,000 for Roy, and then $10,000 or whatever, 10% for each of the call center takers, for a total of 50 grand-ish. And the decision was made that it's the 2% cost of living plus 3% for everyone across the board, not across the board, but for anyone that's looking for a raise, that's what it was gonna be.
Without receiving the pay stuff. So you might as well, so Roy, you might as well have not done a pay study. I mean, what good is a pay study if folks aren't even gonna look at it? Like, I don't understand that. And I guess maybe there's some miscommunication between you and the director, and maybe the mayor's office, but why waste your energy if folks aren't even gonna look at the pay study to actually get a gauge as to what it is that you all rightfully deserve in comparison to other municipalities? I have a fundamental problem with that. I don't know how, whether this is going on in other areas, but, my hope, Gladys, is that you'll express your frustration as well, because that's inexcusable. And if you're overseeing 311 and Roy reports to you, I mean, that conversation needs to be had.
It says. Oh, so the request did not reference a pay study. The request was just an increase of $14,000 without any true context of a salary study that was done. And then compared it to the previous director. So that was not a pay study. The proper way for a pay study is to actually work through the HR department or to figure out and compare us to like cities and towns. We've done pay studies before. We've done the parity study, the pay equity study. And that is what we're supposed to do. So this, on the face of it, is just looking like an increase of $14,000 without saying, hey, here's the backup that goes along with it.
So there was a miscommunication. Is that what you're saying, TJ?
I mean, that's probably the best way to explain it is a lot of increases for the entire team to try to deal with what Roy's going through, which is the massive amount of attrition.
Yeah.
And
was there a miscommunication for the city council administrative assistants? Or did you get that pay study?
In a sense, that was the 2+2 when I remember. It was 2% COLA plus 2%.
Gladys, did they get that pay study?
I didn't see a pay study for the
I didn't see a pay study.
So that was request, and it was 2% cost of living, 2% for additional work related to all the meetings that are being held now. The volume of meetings is more than we've ever had.
Got you. So I just think, I think at the end of the day, we need to figure out, if we're going to do pay studies, we ought to do them correctly so that, they're received by you, TJ, and you guys ought to be reviewing them so that you can arrive at the accurate pay salary for, for the employees. Otherwise, it's useless, and folks are just spinning their wheels and wasting their time.
So Roy, send me a copy of what you have and who you compared it to, and all the other 301 similar job descriptions, not the pay rates. I need to take a look at it.
And my fear, Roy and Gladys, is that you all are both administrators of color. Is that this at the end of the day, when we start to poke holes in everything that's going on, that you all face the brunt of our questions. And so if that happens, I want to know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want some clarification, Gladys, because I thought you said that the staff for the council office got a 2% increase and then an additional 4,000? Is that what I heard, or did I hear that incorrectly?
No, it's total with a 2% plus there, I'd have to do the math on it because I don't have it.
Can you send me, or it might be in the budget. I can look in the
It
budget.
should be in
to
the
see.
budget, yeah.
Yeah, I'll look in the budget to see what they were making previously and see if it's 2% and then another 2%. Because based on what I remember they were making, and unfortunately I don't have the budget right in front of me, it's more than a 2% raise and a 2% raise. The 4,000 total is more than 2% and 2%. However, was there any negotiation on the 4,000? Was the 4,000 the amount that was submitted and then approved? Or was there negotiation
so.
on that amount?
I believe so, but I would have to reference the roster, which I don't have right here with me.
Okay, so if we could get that information before we vote on the budget, that would be great, Gladys, because I just want to make sure that things are happening fair and equitably. And right now it doesn't appear that way to me. And I don't know who's making these decisions, whether it's the finance department or the mayor. But you know, we got to bring these issues up front and to the table so that folks are getting what they deserve. I don't think a department head should be making close to what administrative staff makes. I don't think there's any other department head that's making such a less amount. I just don't think that that's right. I don't think that it's fair, and I think that it needs to be visited. And the study that you mentioned, TJ, with the salaries, can you send that to us?
Yeah, I think I can send that one to you, and I'll also check for the pay equity study that was done as well.
And how long ago were they done? Do you know? Do you remember?
Pay equity, I think might have been 4 years ago. I think when the law passed, we did it, and HR kind of on top of it now is kind of a living, breathing document as we hire folks. So.
And what law was passed? What law are you talking about?
The pay equity law that made sure that we were paying equitable for similar positions. And
okay, because I got a couple of positions in other departments that I know they were not paid equitably. I know it, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there, because it's coming up.
Just two comments on that piece. Definitely raise, if you feel there's a pay equity issue, raise it, because we do want to look at it and review it and figure out if there is in fact one and fix it, make it right. The caveat to that is if they're all part of the union, we go to the whole union. So if they're non-bargaining and it's a pay equity issue, please let them bubble it up to HR to have it take a look at.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's non-union, but I will definitely take a look and see for sure.
Hey, to be 100% honest with you, I have had to use the pay equity law to increase salaries for a few of my employees to bring them on par, and it's something that I take very seriously, and we take very seriously here is the pay equity, and we try to do the best we can for that. So if you know of cases, and I can talk to Roy, personally about it tomorrow, but if you know of cases, please let them bubble it up directly to me if you want. I have no problem taking those to HR.
All righty, then I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Are there any further questions relative to the 311 budget? Seeing none, thank you very much, Roy, and thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And we'll go now to the Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. The FY23 budget for A&F or OMB, whatever we're calling it these days, is a $1.2 million recommended appropriation, which is an increase of 7.8% from fiscal 22. There's the same 12 FTEs in the general fund, and there have been 5 FTEs added to the ARPA unit grants. And our OTPS funds, the MMA dues, some consultants that do a little work for us, Office Supplies, ProScan, and a few other odds and ends within the other than personal services. The department has taken on the ARPA office and the challenges related to implementing the new law. We've taken over all the police grants directly managed out of finance, and happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, TJ. Are there any questions relative to the finance department's budget? Councilor Whitfield.
Of course there is, Mr. President.
I was hoping I was going to skip by.
No. We're going back to pay, okay? I just want to know, were there any salary increases above the 2% increase that I guess most employees are getting?
Yeah, so during fiscal 22, we promoted an analyst to a senior analyst. And then we had regraded the analyst salaries because when they were hired, they're hired at the old financial analyst salary as it relates to being outside of City Hall. And we realized there was a discrepancy when we were hiring in other departments for financial analysts, say Echo Dev or Community Development, that they were making the same amount as the analysts in City Hall. And there's always been a one tier above for the citywide analysts as opposed to the analysts in the departments based on the work. And so those were the increases that would be technically above the 2%.
And the analysts, based on their level of experience and their years of service, are all pretty much getting paid the same?
Yeah, they're all pretty comparable salary wise based upon years of experience. Those that have master's degrees, those that are pursuing master's degrees are all taken into consideration.
And what about you, TJ? What about you?
What about me? I just got a contract renewal extension, so I'm up for another 3 years executed today. So as of March 28th, I have 3 more years of employment.
3 more years of employment. So you negotiated a new contract?
Contract extension.
Oh, contract extension. And it tells what your raises will be over the 3 years?
Tells what the raise will be in year 1, and then upon satisfactory performance reviews with the mayor for years 2 and 3.
Well, you get awards every year.
Yeah, see?
Congratulations on the award, by the way.
Thank you.
This is a good looking budget. It has really matured over time. So, all right, those are my questions for finance.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Any further questions for the finance office? Seeing none, we will move to our final meeting for this evening, or our final department for this evening. And I will dare say it was a good move to split this in half. So our final department will be capital asset construction. And I know Pete Garvey is here. So we'll go to Pete.
Good evening, Peter Garvey, Director of Capital Asset Construction. We have a level funded budget of $504,000. We're in charge of all the planning and construction and closeout of construction projects throughout the city. There's a lot of projects that you probably see, and there's probably a lot of projects that you don't see. So currently we have 9 projects in planning, 6 projects that are being built, and 6 projects in closeout. Those projects go from anywhere from $1 million to $90 million in construction value. As you know, COVID has struck the construction industry pretty hard, and we were able to battle through that as far as getting manpower and materials. We struggled a little bit, but we've seemed to be able to pull through. We brought the Brightwood Lincoln project in, and we're currently working on a larger project, DeBerry Swan School, Forestry Building, SciTech Windows and Doors, Water Shops Pond, and the solar project at Brookings. So that's pretty much it. We have 5 FTEs.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions for Director Garvey relative to the capital asset planning department, capital asset management? Seeing none. Peter, I should have let you gone first.
I was hoping.
Yeah,
It's a joy to hear it all.
A pretty straightforward budget. That's good. All right. So seeing no questions for Peter at this time, it would bring us to the conclusion of our agenda. Are there any questions prior to our adjournment? And just for the record, we will reconvene for our final budget hearing on June 8th at 5:30 p.m. Seeing no further questions, then we will stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.